are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about job hunting, building a business, obtaining wealth or building wealth, all the financial aspects of our lives. This is the broadest based show that I do. We talk about everything from success motivation to relationships to the nuts and bolts of creating an entity, for running a business, pretty much everything in that realm. And so today I'm going to be focusing on the more of kind of the mindset that it takes for financial success. As I've been promoting the show this week, I've been mentioning that I'm a Trojan. I went to the University of Southern California, fight on, as we say. But my source for today's show is Coach John Wooden, the absolutely legendary basketball coach at the University of California at Los Angeles. And of course, USC and UCLA are arch rivals, crosstown rivals. I come by my respect for Coach Wooden. Honestly, I think first of all, I admire his accomplishments tremendously. Second of all, going back now about, I think close to 40 years, I had the opportunity to hear him speak in person. He spoke extemporaneously, as I recall, and it was absolutely inspiring to hear him do that. And as well, one of my longest standing and closest friends, a man I call my brother, even though we have different mothers, as they say. I guess it's like, what was that album, Twin Sons of Different Mothers? My friend Dell. Although Dell got his PhD from USC, he was a professor at UCLA for several decades. So there are connections there. But in any event, and perhaps it is a tribute of just how great an individual Coach Wooden was, that someone from his arch rival school, right, wants to talk about what his legacy and his ideas. So my sort of source book is this wonderful, it's a little book. It's just not even 200 pages long, as I recall. 201 pages. There you go. So it's a 201 page book, but you can get through it in a single reading easily. It's called Wooden, A Lifetime of Observations and Reflections on and Off the Court. And it's ostensibly written by John Wooden, but it's with Steve Jameson, who probably was the guy who actually sort of wrote it down by talking to Coach Wooden, which is a a respectable way of documenting your legacy. And so I'm going to talk about a few of Coach Wooden's ideas, but really there is absolutely no substitution for reading this book. It is inspiring. It is just, it so well, I think, encompasses everything that Coach Wooden is about. And this picture on the back here, this is Coach Wooden. I think, as a young man there, I think that's his wife, if I'm not mistaken. Here he is, toward the end of his career. And here's one of his favorite sayings is right here. It says, "I pray thee, O God, that I may be beautiful within." What a tremendous sentiment from a man who spent his professional life in the rough and tumble world of sports, of college athletics, and I think it speaks very, very well of Coach Wooden that he would put something like that on the back cover of his book. So if you were to flip through the table of contents, you'll see there's just dozens and dozens of, they're all very short. Each one is maybe about a page long, many of them shorter than a page. Just thoughts that he gives on, you could say they're thoughts on success. I would argue that they're thoughts on how to be not just a decent human being, but a fine human being. And I would go further with this in saying that if we want to be successful in business, I think the first thing we have to do is strive to be a decent human being. I know there are many people out there who see business as a cutthroat endeavor. If I lose, that meant somebody else wins. And so I can't have that. I've got to win at the expense of somebody else. And I don't have that perspective on business. My perspective is that the best business relationships are those where we're working for mutual benefit. Sometimes one of us may get a little bit more benefit than the other, but then maybe next time the other person is going to benefit a little bit more. But indeed, the business transactions that actually close, if you will, that go through, are those where both sides see that they have a significant benefit in having the transaction come together and having the deal come together. And if one side doesn't see that, it's unlikely that it will. I can tell you that in my practice as an independent trustee and probate administrator, one of the challenges is often it's a situation where one party, if you will, to the action sees, and or it is actually the case that they're not going to benefit at all. And so they have no reason to cooperate. And as a result, they just keep, lobbing grenades, metaphorically, into the process, because why not? And unfortunately, you can find lawyers who will help facilitate this. And all it does is drag out the process. It raises the costs. It causes a tremendous amount of bad feeling to no one's benefit. Even the person who's causing the delays, they're not benefiting by it. All they're doing is causing trouble. And it's, in the end, it's very childish, because to harm other people, essentially for no reason, to harm other people because you're upset that you are not part of the inheritance, or because of how somebody put together their will or failed to put together their will, you're excluded. That is oftentimes, if not most of the time, has nothing to do with the people who are poised to benefit. That rests with the decedent, and the decedent is gone now. And so to hold other people responsible for maybe irresponsibility on the part of the decedent, or it may not even be irresponsibility. It may just have been they couldn't deal with the process of proper estate planning. It's very difficult. Facing one's own demise is not an easy thing to do emotionally, and so to sort of wreak vengeance on those people who are benefiting financially anyway from someone dying, when they very likely had nothing to do with your being left out, is immature, if not actually childish. Having said that, I'm dealing with a couple of cases like that right now, where anything the person can do to throw a wrench into the works because they're not going to get anything. They're doing it. So I think that's certainly the antithesis of my business philosophy, and it's absolutely the antithesis of Coach Wooden's philosophy. So I think that if you look at some of his top players, including, for example, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was not just an outstanding basketball player, he was an outstanding man. I'm not a huge basketball fan, frankly, but I admire athleticism, since I don't have very much of it. But my fondest thought of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is actually in the movie Airplane, where he plays the co-pilot. And he's in the cockpit with the pilot and the navigator, and a little boy, comes up to visit the cockpit. That was, a very popular thing to do. I know when I was 5 or 6 years old, I flew on an airplane from Phoenix to Kansas City, Missouri, and I got to go, visit the cockpit. I was absolutely overawed, right? And the boy who's up there visiting, he turns to the co-pilot. He says, "I know you're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar," and then it is Abdul-Jabbar, but he's of course playing the co-pilot, Roger, I think is his name, and he says, "No, you're making a mistake. I'm the co-pilot, Roger such and such." And finally, the boy says, "I think you're great, but my father says, you're lazy and you just mail it in," kind of thing. He, of course, at that point, Abdul-Jabbar breaks character, and he grabs the boy by the front of his shirt, and he says, you try lapping Lanier or whoever the players he mentions on the court for 60 minutes and see how you stand up. But I mean, it's such a perfect moment of, he's like trying to be all calm and, be the, stay in his character, and then he breaks character. It's one of the great movie moments. But that he would, allow himself to be, put in this position of this little kid sort of putting him down, on behalf of his father. It shows a certain humility that I think Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had, and I would venture to say, although I don't know this for a fact, this is something he learned from Coach Wooden, and there are many players who I think attribute their maturity into manhood to Coach Wooden's teaching. And so I never got to actually speak with John Wooden, but I would love to ask him the question, were you building great basketball players, or were you building great men? And I have a feeling that he would say he was building great men who were also extremely capable basketball players. And again, I think that speaks very well of him, of Coach Wooden. So in business too, to go back to my original theme, I think we want to be fine human beings, and not allow ourselves to be dragged into the gutter regions of business, and in that way build a loyal and respectful clientele, and when we make mistakes, admit them and fix them, that kind of thing, and approach business with some humility. And so that's why I think it's important from time to time to talk about ideas from various sources, like these lifetime observations of Coach Wooden. So I just have a few here that I want to share with you. This is going to be, I think the show is going to be a little bit on the shorter side, and that's okay. So Coach Wooden talks about the pyramid of success, and he lays out the character traits and behavior that are essential for achievement. And of course, he talks primarily from a non-business standpoint, from a life standpoint, if you will. But I think that these traits that he identifies are absolutely crucial to success in business today. And some of them maybe even more so because of how business has changed. So among the qualities that he mentions are industriousness or hard work, enthusiasm, loyalty, and team spirit. So I just want to talk for a couple of minutes about each one. So clearly, industriousness is the foundational element to business success. If you're not going to get out and work hard, you're not going to be successful in business or a profession. That's just the bottom line. And you know, I had a meeting yesterday with some colleagues, and we were talking about some of the things happening in the real estate business these days. So there's been some pretty significant changes in the way real estate commissions work, and how real estate agents get compensated. And one of those is that historically, agents working with the buyer of a property didn't really have to worry about how they were getting paid, because the seller of a property paid a commission, and it was split between the agent representing the seller and the agent representing the buyer. And so buyer's agents didn't have to deal with that. And under the new system, this sharing of commissions is not it can't be the common thing that it used to be. And so buyer's agents have to be proactive in figuring out how they're going to get paid. And there's different ways that can happen. They can be paid by their client, they can be paid directly by the seller, these sort of things. So, but the reality is, they've got agents working with buyers have to do their homework in figuring out how all this is going to work. They have to read the new forms that have been developed to deal with the new situation. And a lot of them just haven't done the work. So we were talking about a situation where a buyer's agent was interested in a property being marketed by my colleague. And he basically said to him, well, just however you want to get compensated, make that part of an offer on the property, and the seller will consider that. So instead of doing that, he called someone else and asked the same question. And she was smart enough to say, well, you have to call essentially the first guy you spoke to, right? And the conversation that ensued really came down to, he just didn't want to do the work, right? And that's a problem. So that's why and this is just one small example, but this is why industriousness is so important. So we were sitting in a coffee shop in the downtown LA Arts District. I'm going to give them a plug because they're so fantastic. It's called Verve. So if you have not been to Verve, there's, I think, 3 or 4 of them in the LA area. That is the place to get coffee as far as I'm concerned. One of the reasons why I say this is because the people who work at Verve are industrious. So, they are clearly there to work and provide coffee and service to the customers. You really don't have to ask for anything. So my colleague was pouring out some additional coffee, and he spilled some, and right away one of the people was there with some napkins to help him, wipe it up. And it's like, wow, who does that today anymore? Right? It's just the people who are working there, they're there to work. Right. And this is what we need in business. We need employees, we need colleagues who want to work. After our meeting was done, I I went and spoke to the sort of young fellow who I thought was the manager. It turned out he was just somebody who worked there, which is that by itself is impressive, right? He's just a guy who's working there, but he carries himself like a manager, like someone who's really responsible for the success of the business. And I said, I just want to thank you that, your atmosphere is great. The service here is incomparable. I said, I wanted to thank you. I said, you're the manager, right? And he says, no, I just work here. I said, oh, well, for what it's worth, please pass on what I said, to your manager, because, he's got a fantastic crew here, and it's really a pleasure to come here. And he was very grateful, that I took the time to say that. We had a nice little conversation for a few minutes. But the industriousness that he exhibited, like I said, it's not common in business anymore. I won't bore you with more examples, but it's one of the daily challenges I have in my profession. Is a lot of the people with whom I have to deal, they just really don't want to do the work, and so they're not going to be successful. So next is enthusiasm, and I'm going to continue on I'm going to get you to go to Verb Coffee. I guess that'll be my goal for today, right? But the people there are also very enthusiastic. First of all, they have a really outstanding product. The coffee is delicious. There's no other way to describe it. And I think they know they have a great product. They've got a better product than I think any coffee shop I've been to. And they're enthusiastic about it. They're not, doing back handsprings in the aisles or anything, but they're sort of, there's a feeling you get that there's a pride when they serve you, the coffee, when they bring it to the table. And again, that kind of enthusiastic pride, that sort of calm pride that I think is enthusiasm, it makes a difference, and it makes it a pleasure to be there, to have a cup of coffee, or in my case, a cup of espresso, right? So again, in a business, we want to help our people, our teammates, whatever your colleagues, develop a certain enthusiasm for our business or for our practice. Because that means that they're really engaged with what they're doing, right? And it's not an easy thing to do. It may be the hardest thing to do, and it takes a lot of care on the part, a lot of attention and a lot of care on the part of the leadership of a business. And so, we need to pay attention to that. I think that's, helping his players build enthusiasm, I suspect, was one of, John Wooden's geniuses, right? And it's something that I try and emulate in my business relationships. So and again, I think we need to be careful. Enthusiasm often comes off as like rah, sis boom. I mean, there are times maybe when that's appropriate, but the way I read enthusiasm is a sense of real pride in what we're doing, that we can convey through our actions, through how we talk about things. Okay. Next is loyalty, and loyalty seems like a bygone trait today. Sadly, I will tell you candidly, I struggle with the lack of loyalty in American society today. Now, loyalty doesn't mean fealty; those are not the same thing. So, loyalty means committing to being a part of something in a productive way, right? That's true loyalty. And again, this is something that leadership needs to work to develop among, team members, colleagues, employees, however we describe them. And it's something that's built. I don't think, especially these days, we can take loyalty for granted. Maybe there was a time, I don't know, half a century or more ago, when it was expected that if someone was part of an organization, they would be loyal to it. Today, we can't expect that. And I think part of the reason we can't expect that is organizations are no longer unreservedly loyal to the people who work for them. So, we periodically go through periods of massive layoffs. Now, they're necessary in a lot of cases, but they evince a sort of lack of loyalty to employees, right? And so it shouldn't be any surprise to us that people who have been laid off from a business feel that in some ways the business has been disloyal to them. I think that's largely the case right now. Hopefully, the company will help them in a transition to their next situation or whatever, and express some loyalty even as they insist that people have to leave. But loyalty can't be taken for granted, and so I think we have to be careful too, as we work to develop loyalty, that we explain that there are qualities that we're looking for in the people to whom the organization is going to be loyal. So if people are not giving their industriousness and their enthusiasm to the organization, then maybe it's correct to not exhibit loyalty toward those individuals, nor to expect them to exhibit loyalty toward the organization, right? So these are the factors that have to balance themselves out. And this is why I think as we hire people and bring them into our organizations, we need to be very mindful of, what traits are we looking for in our team members, and what expectations are we setting, and how do we handle a situation where someone has not met those expectations, right? Probably not the right thing to just, fire them at the first mistake. Probably, needs an opportunity to, for some additional training and working with them, and then also explaining to them that, look, here's the level at which we're expecting you to operate. We're willing to work with you to get up to that level, but we do need to get you up to that level. And candidly, if you're not able to rise up to that level, then perhaps this isn't the right organization for you, and you'll have to find somewhere else to work. Okay, so we want to develop loyalty, but we also want to do so in a way that it's mutual and it's beneficial. It's not one. It's mutual, and so that those to whom we're giving loyalty as an organization are loyal back to us, and vice versa, right? And then finally, team spirit. So if we want to build a strong company, I think there has to be a team spirit. And what that means is we all pitch in as necessary to get done what needs to be done. We all listen to each other. We all take on board ideas. We're all willing to hear criticism, if you will, or constructive input from other people, whether they're junior, whether they're senior, shouldn't necessarily matter. Now, of course, we want these kinds of dialogues to be respectful. We don't want a junior person, cursing out the, president of the organization. But by the way, we don't want the president of the organization cursing out the junior person either, right? And so if we're really going to have team spirit, it really means we need to work together and build together, and that means really creating a lot of cross conversations so that people feel they are part of a team. Okay, so those are those are some of the basics of John Wooden's pyramid of success. Okay, and so that's number one. Number two, focus on process, not just outcomes. So um, John Wooden believed in being the best that you can be rather than fixating on winning. And by the way, it's being the best that you can be doesn't mean being perfect. So I think John Wooden would agree that the pursuit of perfection is counterproductive. He emphasized quality, innovation, and continuous improvement. The problem with pursuing perfection is we're never going to reach it. And the desire to and so the desire to be perfect is as likely to cause us to not improve as it is to improve. Now, I've had this discussion with many people, and some who virulently disagree with me on this. To a certain extent, I find these arguments to be somewhat semantical, but the reality is, if we make as our objective something so lofty, and we create a situation where we're so afraid of the consequences of not making that lofty goal, we're creating a situation where we're unlikely to try. Okay? I see this a lot among young people, especially. So what we want to do is to create an environment where it's understood that as we strive to be the best that we can be, we know sometimes we're going to fall short. And so then the emphasis is on, okay, what went wrong? How do we correct it? How can we do better next time? That's the feedback loop of which we want to be a part. Now, obviously, in sports, so we're training, we're drilling, we're practicing. That's all a part of that, okay? And we're all doing that in order to win the game, right? So business doesn't seem to work that way, right? Because in business, the game is sort of always going on, right? Nonetheless, it actually is the same process. So whether we're in sales, where today we're looking to sell to a prospect, and tomorrow we're going to do so, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. So yes, we're always in the game. But the reality is that what we should be striving to do with each encounter is improve, right? Knowing that we're not going to close every sale. Okay, that's people who have to close every sale almost never become good salespeople, because they're so afraid of not closing a sale that they don't take the risks that are necessary to become a top salesperson. Okay, so we want to emphasize quality, having quality skills, building our knowledge, that making sure that knowledge is solid. It's not just a bunch of fluff. Okay, we want to emphasize innovation. How can we do things better, more efficiently? How can we connect better with people, etc.? And how do we continuously improve, I should say, so that we're not sitting on our laurels. That's the culture we want to create in our businesses with our people. And that means we've got to give them the leeway to make mistakes and sometimes to fail, and not come down on them like a ton of bricks for having done so, but approach it from the standpoint of, okay, so that didn't work. What do you think went wrong? Right? How could you do this differently in the future, so as to raise the likelihood of success, or as to make it more likely that you'll be successful the next time, right? That's really what's important. And that gives, and by the way, that goes back then to the previous things we were talking about: loyalty, teamwork, enthusiasm, team spirit. Okay, so all of these traits and aspects work together. Okay, so we want to work on process. We want to focus on process, not just outcomes. Now, of course, we need a certain level of sales to close, for example, in order for the business to exist, if not thrive. Of course we do. But what's going to make the business successful and what it's going to improve outcomes is going to be focusing on a process of continuously improving. That's what's going to drive it. Okay. Number 3, make each day your masterpiece. I will cop to struggling with this at times, right? So this idea is that consistent effort and excellence in our daily work is really what's going to lead to success, right? So this is kind of like being the best that you can be, but the road to success is paved with a lot of kind of just grinding it out, if you will. Right now, it's easier to see this in sports, right? If you're going to be a great basketball player, you probably are going to dribble the ball like, I don't know, 1,000 times a day. You're going to take hundreds of free throw shots and hundreds of shots on goal over a week or maybe even just a few days, right? It's the practice, the continuous practice that is going to that's going to drive success, and it's actually better to. So let me switch the metaphor for a moment here. Let's say you want to be successful in playing a musical instrument. You'll be better off practicing an hour a day, like 6 days a week, than you would be practicing 6 hours a day, 1 day a week. You'll make much more improvement practicing an hour a day, 6 hours, 6 days a week. That's just the way, building things are, because you practice 6 hours a day, but then you don't practice 6 hours on one day, but then you don't practice again for another 7 days. So your muscle memory, for example, atrophies. I know this from having learned to play the ukulele, right? And so the same thing is true in anything in which we're involved. So if we're in accounting, if we're in sales, if we're in management, right? It's the daily engagement in our activities and working to make each one of them excellent, or at least better than they were the day before, that's going to drive the success in a business. Okay. So if we're in sales and we do presentations to customers, so what really matters is each day consistently working to making that presentation a little bit better. Okay. And that consistency on a day-by-day basis will eventually create kind of a system of sustained success. So that's really what we want to do. Okay. And again, make each day your masterpiece really is saying that each day, we have an opportunity to paint the canvas of what that day is going to be all about. Okay. So we can either do that or not. And if we're only looking to do that once a week and the other 5 or 6 days a week we mail it in, we're probably not going to be successful either as people or as businessmen. Okay, next, control the controllables. So Coach Wooden emphasized preparation, effort, and attitude. Because those are things that we can control rather than worrying about things that are outside our control, like what the other team is doing. We have no control on that. I was having a conversation with someone earlier today on this very subject. And I was mentioning to him that one of the biggest frustrations of my practice is I deal with a lot of lawyers that are basically in opposition to my clients, or they're in opposition to my administration of a probate, and I have no control over what they do. Some of them are extraordinarily nasty. They love launching ad hominem attacks, and it's after a while it gets pretty aggravating, right? When their case against something that I'm doing is that I'm a scoundrel, essentially, right? But I unfortunately I don't have, well, not unfortunately, it's just reality is I don't have any control over what they say. I have no control over their ethics. I have no control over them at all. They're going to do what they're going to do. And my job is to, as much as possible, ignore them, or at least ignore their behavior, and focus on making sure I'm as well prepared as possible, focus on delivering the best effort that I can make, and focus on keeping my attitude where it needs to be. And I can tell you it's a challenge sometimes, because I'll be in court and some lawyer will be saying absolutely nasty, untrue things, and the temptation is to say, Your Honor, tell this clown to shut up, right? But that's not going to help the situation. In fact, it's going to make the situation worse. So I have to adjust my attitude and remind myself that I don't have any control over what this person is saying, and I also have no control over whether the judge believes it or not. So it's tempting for me to think, oh, because the person is saying this and the judge is not telling him to shut up, that the judge believes it. But I don't know that that's the case, okay? Or I don't always know that that's the case, right? So and so we need to focus, or we need to keep in mind that we should work on controlling the controllables, and those are the preparation that we do, they're the effort that we put in, they're the attitude that we bring to our business, right? Those are the things that will help us be successful, and the rest we have to let go of. So by focusing on preparation, effort, and attitude, what we're really doing is we're focusing on execution, on adaptability, on resilience. All of these are things that we can work on, things that we can build, especially adaptability and resilience. Now, I'll be the first one to acknowledge there are times when our resilience fails in life, in business, right? And if it does, okay. So then we need to regroup. We may need to rest and sort of regain our equanimity, regain our perspective, and then move on from there. Okay. And look, we're not perfect. This is where striving for perfection can also be very negative. If we mess up in our adaptability and resilience, okay, right, we got to give ourselves a little bit of grace, and okay, figure out how do I do it better next time, and then move on. And remember, just focus on controlling the controllables and let the other stuff fall by the way. Okay, next, number 5, little things make big things happen. So very small improvements can have a big impact on our business. I experienced this myself earlier this year. So again, I was talking to somebody about this earlier today. I was feeling for the last up until about a month or two ago, and for the last year, I was feeling essentially overwhelmed by everything that I had to do. And I realized that it mostly came from the fact of how I was keeping track of what I had to do. So I was grouping tasks by the person to whom I was responsible, and oftentimes so since I was working by the person, I would never check that task off my list, right? And I realized, wait, that's the wrong way to do it. because I know going in, I'm not going to get all those tasks done, because oftentimes I had to get one done before I could even do the next one, that sort of thing. So what I started doing was focusing on the individual tasks that need to be accomplished for a particular person, but dividing them up. Okay, so I didn't have a list of 8 things that it looked like I was responsible for getting done today, and then maybe I would get half of one of them done, and so tomorrow I still have the same list of 8 things. No, I broke them down, so I have 8 tasks now instead of one task with 8 parts. And just a small change like that helped me realize I was actually accomplishing a lot. And in any given day, I actually had a pretty reasonable amount of work to do. Okay. And it's even made me be able to get through tasks more quickly, because I'm not sitting there staring at the long list saying, how am I going to get this done? Right. So just a small tweak has allowed me to be much more productive in my practice, in my professional life. Right. And oftentimes that is how these things work. So we overlook, it should have been obvious, I think, to me, that I was, handling my task completion in a counterproductive way, right? So oftentimes it'll be some little thing that we're just not seeing, and that can be holding us back, and so we need to take time to sit back and examine, why am I not as productive as I need to be, or why am I feeling stressed out? Is it really justified? And one of the tasks, one of the not tasks, one of the processes I use is when I'm feeling particularly stressed out, whether it's about work, which is often the case, or something else, is I sit down and write out what's going on. And oftentimes I feel that once I've written it down, I realize it's not as overwhelming as it feels like up here in my head. So the process is to get it out of our heads, down onto paper. Once it's down on paper, we can start breaking it up. And well, first of all, we can look at what if that I put on paper is real and what's not real. And then for the stuff that's actually real, we can start breaking that down to deal with it. For the stuff that's not real, we can work on reminding ourselves, this actually doesn't have any bearing on my life. It's something I've conjured up in my head, but it really has no impact. Okay, so the way to find little things that can make big things happen, I think, is to start putting things down on paper. And it may seem like, well, why do I want to take the time to do that? The process of writing them down is what helps us gain clarity. Okay, so if we're stuck in something in business, or in our business or professional lives, start writing it down. Okay, and then if you have a trusted friend or a mentor, talk to them about it, show them what you've written down, and get their input about it. Okay, and that will oftentimes help us make what is probably only needs to be a small change, a tiny breakthrough that will then yield tremendous results. Okay, and then finally, number 6, be true to yourself. So Coach Wooden preached integrity and authenticity. Now, I think this is very important, but I also think it's oftentimes highly misunderstood. So I've been in situations where people say, very nasty things, very impolitic things, impolite things. And if I'm in a situation where I can, sort of call them on it, they'll say, look, I'm just being me. Right? So, oh, okay, well, that's fine. And again, this happened just this morning. I had this happen, and they say, "Well, this is who I am. This is how I deal with these things." And I said, "That's fine." I said, "But you're not reaching me by being that way." Right? So I think we need to be careful when we talk about integrity and authenticity. So integrity means staying true to our values, and hopefully we have good values, and so they are worth staying true to. Okay. The way we express that integrity, though, can take many different forms. So we can say to someone, look, this is a situation that I find I am at odds with, and I cannot be involved with this situation any longer. And so I need to bow out. Okay. Now, that's done. That's, we've maintained our integrity, and hopefully have done so in a way that that says to the other person, that expresses some that is, it decently treats the other person. That's what I want to say. Decently treats the other person. Okay. We can also say, look, you're turning me into an effing liar. I won't stand for that. F you, get out of my face. Okay. Now, I suppose we're acting with integrity there too, because we're expressing that we're not going to be put in a position that's in conflict with our values. But we're not doing it in a particularly decent way. Now, this is where the issue of authenticity comes in. For some people, it will feel inauthentic to express their desire to act in an integral way, in a way that also treats the other person decently. Okay. And that may be a problem, but it's only a problem if part of their values are, I don't care how I treat people. Okay. Now, by the way, if your value is, I care about how I'm treated, but I don't care about how other people are treated, you have conflicting values. That's just the bottom line. So if you care about how you're treated, then you have to care about how you treat other people. Okay. If you abuse other people, then you can't expect them to turn around and treat you decently. Okay. The best you can expect is they walk away from you and ignore you. Okay. So this is where, and this is where I think the concept of authenticity is sometimes misapprehended, because while the truly authentic, our truly authentic nature may want us to just pound somebody. Okay. If our authenticity is at odds with our values should govern. Okay. And look, I said this to the person I was talking to this morning. I said, I value calm relationships where people treat each other decently. That's what I value. And if that's, not something that you value, that's fine. I said, but then I think it would be very difficult for us to work together. And that's fine. I'm not saying somebody has to adopt my values. All I'm saying is, if you don't have my values, okay, which include the necessity to treat people decently, in part because I want to be treated decently, so then this is probably not a relationship that's going to work out. Okay. And I don't accept as an excuse, well, I'm just being authentic to myself. Oh, that's fine. Okay, fine. Go be authentic somewhere else. Okay. Because authenticity is not an excuse in my values. Authenticity is not an excuse for indecent treatment. Okay. And so I think we use these terms somewhat inaccurately. We sometimes use them as excuses, I'm sure I've done it in the past. I hope when I have, I've been willing to hear it if someone called me on it, or I've been willing to reflect on my behavior and apologize for it. I'm sure that hasn't always been the case, but we're again not perfect. Okay. But in the end, we need to be true to ourselves in business. And the prerequisite to that is knowing who we really are and assessing, is this truly who we want to be? Okay. Because as we decide who we want to be, we're going to get that reflected back to us by other people, generally speaking. So if we decide that we do want to be someone who's very aggressive, who puts it in people's faces, then when we receive that, we shouldn't be surprised. And if we don't like it, well, that's kind of tough for us, because we're getting as good as we're getting as good as we're giving, and that's largely how life works, especially in business. Okay. So real quickly, again, just repeating the list here that I'm working with from John Wooden's Wisdom, as I called it, Wooden's Wisdom. Right? He talks about the pyramid of success, those character traits and behaviors that are essential for achievement. Focus on process, not just outcomes. Make each day your masterpiece. Control the controllables. Little things make big things happen. And finally, be true to yourself. So if we can follow Wooden's wisdom, especially as he writes here in this book, I think not only will we be more successful, I think we'll be happier as well. Or maybe not happier, but we'll be more content. And people who have a sense of contentedness about them generally attract other people to them. And that's good for business as well. So again, I encourage you to read Wooden and absorb more of Wooden's wisdom and go on to ever greater success, not just in your business and professional lives, but in your overall lives. So I thank you very much for joining me today, especially those of you who are watching live. Always a treat to know you're there. And this is my last show for this week. So next week on Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, Trust and Estates Weekly. I found out yesterday my guest has a conflict. She's not going to be able to make it. We'll see if we can reschedule Tiffany for another time. But we'll be there. We'll be there at 10 a.m. on Monday talking about matters relating to trusts and estates. On Tuesday at 10 a.m. is my show, Business Lessons from the Military. A week from today, we'll be back for the next edition of People Making Money. And then next week on Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time is my every other week show, Jiggers' Place, where we sit back. It's getting toward the end of the week. We have a cocktail and we talk about all the things that have nothing to do with our professional lives. So I hope you'll join me several times next week. Look forward to seeing you, at least metaphorically, and wishing you a wonderful rest of the day and week, and signing off as I always do. Marie, darling, you are my bell. Courage at all times, my friends.